Welcome back to Gaming Top Down. My name is David, and today we're going to be taking a look at Sand, the newest game in De Beers medium box line. This is a pick up and deliver game, which is a genre I have not traditionally enjoyed. But this is more of a Euro game with a puzzle about keeping your inventory on your silkworm. So I was hopeful that this one would win me over to this genre. Also has some really cool art, so I was very intrigued going in. Let's hop over to the table. I'll show you how I store the game, how it's set up, and how it plays. Go through my review, and then we'll come up back here for a final word. Okay, coming over here to the table, I always start with how I store the game. And for Sand, it's pretty straightforward. A lot of De Beers games in this medium box line have gotten some heat for being difficult to fit back in the box, but I did not have really any trouble with this one. I know Bamboo's a little bit tighter. I also got that back in the box though. Maybe I'm just really good at Tetris, I'm not sure, but I always try to keep the rule book on top. And then I have a baggie for each player color. We've got one for green here with all the tiles that would go on their board, one for brown, one for tan, and one for purple. And then I just store these dice right in the dice tray. Got a baggie for all of the variability set up with the different tiles and the different player characters. A bag for the cards. I do sleeve my cards, but you wouldn't have to. They aren't really kept in your hand, so not really 100% necessary. I just wanted to. And then the cards for the solo character and his components in a tiny little baggie here. I would recommend sleeving those. I shuffle them between every turn, and so I find those being sleeved helpful. The 4 player aids, which I really appreciated. They're a good player aid. And then I get these little trays or holders from the dollar store, Dollar Tree, just to hold the money. So this is the 20s, 50s, and 100s over here. And then the 1s, 5s, and 10s in this one. Very simple for that. The different goods that you can sell in the 3 different, what are they called? Classifications, I guess, or rarity levels. Then the bag of the flowers. And then we've got the 4 player boards and the board at the bottom. So yeah, I don't know. I didn't find this one tricky to put back in the box, but let me know how you've stored this game. I always love to see how other people store games. It gives me good ideas for how I could be more efficient with my storage, where I generally try to store a game in a way that will make it as fast as possible to set up, or else I won't want to pull the game off the shelf. So that is how I store Sand. Pretty simple, just a baggie for each player, and then the board needs to be set up and card shuffled, and we got the little holders for the currency, and we're ready to go. So let's set the game up here, and I'll be back in just a second to show you how it plays. Okay, I've got the board set up here in kind of a early game state. This is my silkworm, denoting that my caravan is here in this city. This game is played over 6 rounds in a 1 to 3 player game, or 5 rounds in a 4 player game. And in every round, you're going to get 3 turns: a morning turn, an afternoon turn, and an evening turn, tracked by this sun piece over here. The 3 turns will behave basically identically, so you get 3 turns every round. I'm going to slide this board up a little bit so that you can see my player board better now. And this is kind of hopping back to my how I store it. I usually go over my favorite component, and my favorite component of this game is the player boards. They track everything about your caravan, the hydration, hunger, health of your worm that's carrying all of your goods, which goods you're currently carrying and which actions you can take, if you've put your hideout yet. And then this spot here is known as your record of goods sold. And anything that you sell, you're going to place into this record here, depending on which classification of good it is. If it's a flower, it's one of these colors. If it's a craft, it's one of these colors. A relic, one of these colors. Or an Iwakura rock, or these gray ones. And so you'll get different bonuses based on what you're selling, because every time you place a cube on a spot here, you go the top leftmost spot first, and you get the bonus. And you continue on getting bonuses and bonuses of either extra coins or upgrading your worm, putting out your hide up, getting a companion, etc. So this player board is really my favorite piece of this game. You win the game by having the most money at the end of the game to show that your caravan was the most successful at selling goods. And you're going to, again, track that all on your board. Your money is kept down here. And you can see what all of the goods are worth here as well in this table. The different places on the board will either pay you the lower or higher amount for that good based on if they have a negative symbol or a plus symbol by them. So you can see here at the harbor, for example, they don't want the lower level goods, but they will pay the higher price for the rocks and the relics. And then different cities will pay the cities actually, are all the same. They will pay the lower amount for everything, but they won't buy flowers. That's where you generally pick up flowers with these flowers that are already here. So they won't buy flowers, they'll buy everything else at the lower amount. And then there are these trading grounds here, and this is where you'll primarily be selling a lot of your goods at. And they have some goods that they'll buy at the lower value and some at the higher value. They will always accept 2 different colors of that good. If you sell both of these at the same time in a combination, then you get some bonus. If it's the higher value, you also get another good of the next rank up. So that would be a purple craft. If it's the lower value goods, then you get the topmost token here to show your alliance with these different groups. And whoever has the most of these points from these tokens at the end of the game will get a bonus of, I think, $12, which is not insubstantial. So that is kind of the bonus there if you sell those colors together. And that is a pretty smart thing to aim for, is to sell them together. So how the round works is keeping in mind everything that you've got here. You have your silkworms, thirst, hunger, and health. And these will all be spent in order to move. Moving across the board is difficult in this game. It's one of the bottlenecks for sure. And there are 2 different types of trails you can move on. You've got the traditional, regular, safer trails that generally have these oasis spots. So moving from this city to this oasis would be one movement. And then from the oasis to this camp here in order to make a sale is a second movement. And so I'd need to use 2 movements to do that. But those movements will cost me a little bit less because they're safer paths. For example, here it'd be 3 water, 1 hunger, 1 health for the green path, and then 3 water, 2 hunger, 1 health for the gray path. There are also these shortcuts to each city and camp that will get you straight there in 1 movement, but they're a lot more costly. At the beginning of the game, it's 2 water, 5 hunger, and 4 health, and you have to use a value 6 die. Now you can upgrade your worm a couple of times. That'll make those movements easier, which I'll show you in a minute. But movement is the tricky thing that you need to keep track of. You're always needing to make sure that your silkworm has enough hydration, hunger, or food, I guess, and health in order to make these journeys. So on a turn, what you will do is you will look at your action tokens over here, and any of them that are not tied up, this white one, for example, is flipped to the occupied or tied up side because I'm carrying a white flower good. Since I'm carrying this, it's blocking one of my action spots, of which you start with 3 and eventually can unlock a 4th. But every good you're carrying blocks 1, 2. So I have 2 action spots that I can assign actions to this turn. So I need to choose 2 of these 3 available action tokens to take moves with on this turn. You do that by also looking over at these dice that are rolled at the beginning of each of the 6 days, and the strength of the die can be helpful in some scenarios. Like I mentioned, a 6 is needed to move across a shortcut with the worm at the beginning level, and then 4s are needed to travel across the regular path. So a higher value die is very handy here. So if I was going to take a turn here, I've got 2 things that I can do, or 2 actions I can take. So let's use the red since it's a 6, and let's also use black. So using these 2, what I can do with the black is picking up a good costs an action. You have to be in a location with a good, so I'm in a spot with a black flower, so I can flip this over again to its occupied side to show that I am now tied up my black token and it can't be used. And now I've got 2 spots tied up on the board. So I'm kind of in a rough spot here. My worm is very full, but luckily we're going to try and move right down here and sell it anyways. With the red action token, I'm going to use it to use the red die for movement. And using it for movement, I can move through this shortcut to this camp. Now that movement, I did have to have a value die of 6. Even if this had been a 1, my player's power is I can flip 2 dice to their opposite side for my turn. So I could have turned it a 1 into a 6 for her. I think she's a very powerful player power in this game, but we'll talk more about player powers in a minute. So I can move there for a 6. I have to pay 2 hunger for that, 2 hydration, 5 hunger, and 4 health in order to do that. But now that I'm here, I've used both of my action tokens, that is. There are a couple things you can do totally for free, and one of them is to make a sale. So here at this camp, I probably want to make this sale as my free action, a free delivery. So I'm going to sell the black and white goods. By selling them, we'll put them right here for right now, I'm going to get the higher value for both of them, so I'm going to get 3 coins each for those. So I would just take those from the general supply. Let's pretend these were the 6 here that I earned for that. And then since I sold them both together, they're going to give me this bonus purple good, which is a higher value good that can be sold again here at the harbor for a higher value for 6 by itself. So that's a nice perk for doing that. I then get to place these in here in my record of goods sold. So I would cover up a 3 to get 3 bonus coins, and then the next thing I cover up is a worm upgrade. By covering that up, I would take my 3 bonus coins. I'll just take 1 in this example. By getting a worm upgrade, I get to flip this token to the other side, and you get some immediate benefits, which are very wonderful. This one, when you do your first upgrade, you get to remove this blocker. So now I have all 4 action spots available, and I'm going to get 5 thirst, hunger, and health back immediately, which can be a game changer when you are running low. So that was a pretty big turn, actually, to make that sale, get a bunch of money, cover both of those up, upgrade my worm, and get to remove that blocker. Since I'm not carrying a black or white good anymore, I can flip these back over, and then next turn I would get to choose 3 of any of the colors, since none of them are blocked actions to do. There are a couple more things you can do. You can use any color to play a song at a city. You can see these song spots here. Songs give you a bonus coin for every song on the board anytime you make a sale. You also get a bonus coin for every influence point you have here. You can use your prayers to adjust the value of the die when you're moving. So if I had, for example, this was only a 5 and I needed a 6 for that shortcut, I could have used 1 prayer to bump it to a 6 for my action. So there's a lot that you can do here just managing your board. Eventually you're going to cover up one of these spots that lets you unlock one of the 4 companions that do different things. This one lets you carry 2 of the same color good on top of each other, so they only cover up one spot. So that's the baby silkworm. This lady lets you move twice for one action token, as long as you can pay the cost for both paths that you go along. Another main action you'll do on your turns, and it'll take a lot of the, 18 turns that you get, is caring for your worm. So you could use, for example, let's say I used this 6 instead of for movement. I could have used it to get 6 hunger back. So the red die is associated with hunger, the blue one with thirst, and then the black and white ones together for health. So healing your worm is the most difficult. You would have to use both the black and the white action token at the same time to get health back equal to the higher of the 2 dice. Luckily with my character, I could have flipped this to a 6 and healed 6, or bumped it up with a prayer or a coin to make it even higher. So you can adjust those values for bad die rolls, with money and with prayers, which is very handy. So that's primarily what you're going to be doing. You're going to be moving to these different cities, picking up goods using your tokens, which is going to clog up your worm. Eventually, you're going to cover up your hideout, which you can place somewhere. Anytime you're in your hideout, or I guess at the same location as your hideout, you can freely, for no action cost, move goods back and forth between your worm and your hideout. But you can't sell goods in your hideout, so it's just kind of like temporary storage to free up spots here. This character lets you heal your worm's health using only the black or the white action token instead of both together, which is very handy. And this last one's probably the most complex, but very cool. She will convert your relics, these higher level goods, into Iwakura rocks. Up to once per turn, if you have a relic in your hideout, she'll convert it to a rock. Once you commit to rocks, though, you can no longer score end of game objectives, which we haven't gotten to yet, but so you're kind of fully committed to this rock strategy at that point. They are the most valuable. They sell for 13 each, but can only be sold here at the harbor. So a little bit to think about there. Anyways, this isn't a full rules teach, so I won't go over necessarily everything, but the first person to sell 4 of a certain good type will get a seal here that lets them score 1 point for every good of that color they have sold. At the end of each day, in turn order, you'll get to choose a card and either take the top half of the card as an immediate bonus, or the bottom half of the card as an end of game objective, where if I had sold 3 of those light blue relics, then I would get 8 more money at the end of the game. Again, if you had used this character and had sold a rock, then you can no longer score those. So kind of a lot to think about. The farther you get away from the harbor, the resources that you can, or the goods that you can pick up, get better, but then it's harder to get back to sell them. And that's where you need to go in order to get the relics, which you can convert to rocks if you want to go that route, or you can just focus really heavily on the crafts and the flowers. And I've seen people win that way too. Whoever has the most money at the end of the game will be the winner. My favorite part of playing this game is when you're able to make a delivery. Those turns free up your worm, which feels really good, get you a lot of money. If you're able to cover up something cool here in your record of goods sold, you might upgrade your worm or get a new companion, and so you feel more powerful going into your next set of turns. So that's my favorite part of this game, is making those deliveries. I played a solo game of this where I tried really hard to shoot all the way down to the mountains down here, get as many relics as I could, use her to convert them into rocks, and then like a turn before the end of the game, shoot back as fast as I could to the harbor to sell all of them. And I made like 100 points that turn. It was really satisfying. Would have been a big bummer if I hadn't been able to pull it off though, but it was very cool. So there are quite a few different strategies to employ as you're going through the game as well. All right, so let's get into the review portion here. We always use the David's framework here on my channel, since my name is David. And the first one is duration. This game says 120 minutes on the box, and that is pretty correct, especially for a 3 or 4 player game. I played a solo game in probably an hour. I had one of them last an hour and a half. But yeah, if you're playing with 4 players, you each get 18. Well, in a 4-player game, you each get 15 turns. And kind of the puzzle of keeping track of everything on your worm and which of these tokens can I use because can't I use because they're occupied by a good can be a little tricky for new players. So I do feel like, the second play onward is where you'll start to speed up. I do feel like the length is right for this game, though. It doesn't seem too long. You're able to kind of choose a strategy and go after it. It's just long enough to let you do that. So for duration, I think it is just great. Next up is aesthetic and production. I think the artwork in the game is really great. Like I mentioned, I think the pieces and the player board are amazing. I really like tracking everything here. I'm somebody that loves spreadsheets and things like that, so this kind of sings to my spreadsheet heart. But yeah, the component's really good. The dice are really chunky. You got to build this little cardboard holder for them, which I would recommend gluing. Mine keeps falling apart. The only thing I maybe wish is that instead of cubes, these goods were different shapes as you for the different classes. That would maybe make it easier to teach. But I do understand why they did that. They needed the cubes to fit in here to block off those spots for your silkworm. I think in the rulebook it says that they're supposed to symbolize a box of goods. So that makes sense if you teach it as boxes of flowers and crafts, relics, and rocks. So I think the aesthetics are great. Next up is the variability. There isn't like a ton of variability on the board itself. You do mix up these tiles here for the different camps. And so they'll be in a different spot, but they'll always be in the same row as the game before. The main variability comes from each round. These flowers come out of this orange draw bag here, and you don't know what colors are going to be available at each city. That is the main variability. And then I guess you can employ a different strategy from game to game, of which I do find there are quite a few viable strategies. So I think the variability is just about right. Again, for a game like this where you want to feel like you can get better, I don't think introducing a ton more variability here would have helped that goal. There's just enough that it feels different from game to game. There's different players putting songs out and different flowers at each city each time and different objective cards coming out. And I think that's a good level of variability. You also have 8 different asymmetric player powers to choose from for each. Each player gets to play as one. And so I think all of that variability helps. You'll also not probably get to unlock all 4 of your companions. And so which order you unlock them in. So as I talk about this, I think the variability is pretty solid. The one thing I would say about it is we have found that some of these asymmetric powers seem quite a bit better than others. For example, I had Surmesh out, and I think hers is one of the best. Lets you flip the dice to the other side. So basically, unless you're rolling just 3s, any 6s or 1s, 2s and 5s are great for you. Some of the other ones I don't think are as good. These are the 2 that we thought were the least helpful. Stamash lets you, when you have a good on your worm, that action token of the same color isn't blocked, which I guess is handy for if you have like a red token and really need some hunger, you could still get that without having to abandon that red good, but that seems to be the only thing it's good for. He lets you move an extra shortcut, but you have to pay quite a price for it. It's the normal movement plus 3 additional health. Again, pretty brutal to pay for that. The rest of them we thought were pretty solid. This character lets you, when you take care of your worm action, you get whichever color you're doing, thirst, hunger, or healing, you get that many extra of it, either 6, 6, or 4. So taking care of your worm is a lot easier with this character. Sonnet is really cool. Whenever you're at your hideout spot, you can convert the different goods to a different color as long as they're the same level. So I can exchange a flower for a flower, so I could do white for red, or a craft for a craft, exchange green for purple, or a relic for a relic. So that is pretty handy. He lets you work with the acolytes. She gets you 6 prayers at the start of every day, which again is very nice for changing the dice around. And she lets, when your cities are in a, not city, when your songs are in a city, if someone else played a song there, usually it would kick yours out, but her songs cannot be kicked out. So there is some fun variability there. There were a couple of them that we just thought maybe it was just because we were beginners to the game at that point, but we didn't think they were as helpful as some of the others. So you might want to hold a couple of them out. All right, next one is innovative. I mean, I don't think this is a very innovative game, but I do like the combination that it sets up here. You've got pick up and deliver, trying to make the most money as you can, with also this Euro puzzle kind of keeping track of your inventory and the actions that you're going to take. And then you're also upgrading your abilities as you go along. I think that's a good combination that really sings for me. I like this puzzle of managing your worm. That it's very tricky and the movement gets tight managing your resources over here. But when you're able to think ahead, know what you're going to do for a couple of turns, it really feels great. Next up is the decision space. Does the game play itself? And totally no. I think that the decision space here is really great. The sometimes the way the flowers come out randomly out of the bag might kind of point you in one direction versus another, but I do appreciate that on the first round of the game, only one good comes out in each of these top 4 cities. And since all the players start at the harbor, you'd have a huge first player advantage if, you know, both of these were filled. And let's just say, for example, that this city here had black and white. So that first player could just, you know, blast down there, down a shortcut, grab both of these, and then on their next turn, jump right down here and already convert to a purple. So I'm glad that they thought of that to not allow 2 flowers to be in any of those top 4 cities. So yeah, I think the decision space is good. You can, like I mentioned, employ different strategies. Maybe I'm just going to stay up near the harbor the whole game and just try to get as many of these crafts as I can, which just take, you know, selling 2 sets or a set of flowers together. Or maybe I try to get as much favor with the minor tribes as possible. Or I could shoot all the way down the board, try and get as many relics as I can and convert them into rocks. And then right before the end of the game, rush back up to sell as many of them as I can for a killer monster turn. So I do think the decision space here is good. It's a little thinky and heavy. You know, if somebody's got to be willing to play a medium weight Euro game for sure to like this one. Okay, and then last up, smoothness and complexity ratio. Like I just mentioned, it's a little bit of a medium heavy game. I really like the complexity level that this game sits at, but for sure there will be people who don't, who think that this is too tight, that this puzzle of managing your worm is too restrictive, and they don't feel like they can do everything that they want. This is definitely a tight game where the movement is brutal and very hard to move, especially if you want to move a few shortcuts in a row. It's just like all of your health and hunger and thirst are gone if you do that. So you have to be very thoughtful, and it feels like a slog at the beginning, but as you upgrade your worm, it gets easier to move, and you do feel better as you go along. I think once you understand the rule set and how you need to manipulate and manage these tokens, that the tokens tie over to these resources over here, understand what the rewards are, and kind of what your capabilities are, I think it is pretty smooth actually. Because of the blocking of your action tokens, you can't really make too many mistakes. I mean, you technically can, and it's nice to have like somebody that really knows the game to teach it to you and help you take your first few turns. But I feel like it is pretty smooth after you know the rules. The only kind of negative I would say here is learning the rules is a little bit tricky. The rule book isn't terrible in my opinion. I feel like most of the things I needed to know were in there, but it is laid out in an odd way, and I had trouble finding the correct section of the rulebook at times. Luckily now, quite a few really great YouTubers have made their how to play videos that help a lot with that as well. So I think that the smoothness to complexity ratio is just right here for, a pretty complex game. All right, so that was my David's framework. We went through all of the different aspects of this review here. I really like this game. Let's hop back up top for my final word on sand. Okay, if you can't tell at this point, I really love sand. It's by far my favorite pick up and deliver game I've ever played, and has kind of converted me to being open to trying other games in the genre. The only two nitpicks I have about the game are the rulebook is laid out in kind of a strange order, I felt. I do feel like I was able to find the answer I needed in there eventually. It just took longer than I wanted it to find the answers. And the other one is I'm not sure how balanced all of the asymmetric player powers are. Some of them definitely feel better than others. Luckily, there are 8 in the game, and you only play with up to 4 players, so you could kind of hold out the couple that you feel are less helpful than the others. So 2 small nitpicks. Other than that, really loved this game. It really checks all the boxes for me. So it's going to be earning a 9 out of 10, or a platinum trophy here from Gaming Top Down. Thanks so much for watching this review. Make sure to check out the other content I have here on the channel, our monthly giveaway, our weekly podcast, all kinds of good stuff. And if you wouldn't mind liking and subscribing, all the social media jargon, that helps me out a ton as well. Thanks so much for being here, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye.